For this foundation session, I'll cover the process of building different types of foundations: slab, crawl space, full height basement, and a mixed combination of the types. For the full basement foundation, we will look at both a ledgered stem wall and using a furred wall to support the joists above. I will also cover the process of creating a new foundation saved plan view with defaults and layers specific for a foundation. You can use this process to include in a template plan and leverage on your design projects. Let's get started with building a slab foundation. As you get ready to build the foundation, it's important to name a few of your rooms that have properties that will affect your foundation. A garage room is one of those rooms that typically will change the way the foundation is built. This can be beneficial since the program will recognize that room type and assist you in building the foundation in a more correct manner. Let me take a 3D view of the structure so far, and let's go through the process of building a foundation for this structure. I am going to begin with a slab foundation. So underneath the build menu, I'm going to come down. You'll find this setting underneath the floor, and it's build foundation. At the top of the dialog, you'll find the option to automatically rebuild the foundation. In situations where you're moving walls on the floor above, the foundation will automatically rebuild as those walls move. Foundation type is the next area. As I mentioned, I'm going to begin with the option to create a foundation on a monolithic slab. There's the option to change the slab thickness, also the stem walls that are going to be used. You can edit those types of walls. In this case, we're using a footing with 16 inches, the height or the width of the wall at 8 inches, and then you're going to notice in this case the footing alignment is positioned on the inside of the wall. So let's use these settings and create the slab foundation. So you can see that the slab foundation has been created. We have a slight step down for the garage. And then as we kind of peek up and underneath, let me toggle my view to the vector style view so we can see this. You can see that the footing is now aligned and it's on the inside, and that's the way you can create your slab foundation. Let me press undo and let's take a look at building a crawl space foundation. For the crawl space foundation, I'm going to return back into the build menu underneath floor and build foundation. For the crawl space, I'm going to come over and I'm going to mark the walls with footings. There's an option when you're creating a crawl space or a full height basement to hang the first floor platform walls inside the foundation. If you check that, the floor structure will sink down into the floor. With it unchecked, it will stack your joists or your floor trusses on top of the stem walls. I'm going to ignore the slab information. And then for the stem wall, let's change this to be 37.5 inches. You'll notice that right next to the minimum height, there's a note that says that it includes a 1.5 inch sill plate. That means in this case, my stem wall will actually be 36 inches. So let's go ahead and build the crawl space. The program in this case is going to ask us to derive the foundation from the main first floor. That way the footprint will match the floor above. If you choose the option to make a new blank plan for the foundation floor will be created, but there will be no walls. So let's derive the foundation from the first floor, and you can see there is the crawl space foundation style that was created as a result of the settings we just selected. Now you might notice if we zoom in a little bit, my footing is aligned on the outside of that wall. I'll show you as we go through and create a mixed style foundation how to fix that. Also, you could have changed the wall setting as we looked at when we were building the slab to have that footing centered. Let's go through with this crawl space and look at how this could be made a full height basement. I'm going to press Shift F6 on my keyboard and tile my views. In the floor plan side of the design, notice that my floor indicator is on floor 0. To change the room height of the foundation, I'll double click inside of the room space. On the structure panel, I'm going to come down and I'm going to change the ceiling height. And let's just use a rough ceiling of 97 1/8. You can see the structure diagram update. If you need to adjust the stem wall, you can also do that. And when you make that change, you can see the stem walls grow. Let's double click one more time, and if you mark the option to include a floor underneath of this room, then you'll see the slab that's in the bottom get created as a result of making that change. To create a mixed style foundation, let's come over into the floor plan view, and I'm going to grab one of the walls and let's pull it across. Let's assume that on the right hand side would be the full height basement, and on the left side this can be a slab, it can be a crawl space. If I change the stem wall, I'm going to uncheck the floor underneath this room. We change the stem wall height back to 37.5. You can see that we can easily create a mixed foundation in this situation. Now for the other side, let's assume that we want to change this from a crawl space back to a slab. Let's go back in, double click on the room. The first thing I'll do is mark that the room supplies the floor for the room above. Then I'm going to move up into the elevation information. I'm going to set that to be 0. And then I'm going to change the stem wall height to be 6 inches. And then finally, at the very bottom, for the floor structure itself, click the Edit button. And I'm going to come over, use the Insert below. I'll change the thickness to be 2 inches. That will total 6 inches. Click on the texture, and I'm going to search for an insulation that I can use in here. You can see the floor structure. In the 3D view, let's go ahead and rotate around and take a look. You can see that the insulating foam for the slab is underneath, and then for the walls that will be forming the foundation basement portion, I want to take these walls and I want to take the footing, center it, and I also want to raise them up so that they are in line with the slab elevation wise, and I can hang the floor platform. To do that, I'm going to move over into the floor plan view. Let's use our cross-section camera view. Actually, the back clip. We'll slide the clip through the area. I'm going to pull this view over, and let's just kind of slide that over here, and then use the zoom tool so we can see exactly what we're talking about for the foundation. You can see the walls have an offset for the footing. Let's begin there and center the footing. Over in the floor plan view, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. I want to take the walls and I want to center the footing. To do the centering of the footing, I'm going to click on the leftmost wall. I'm going to use the break tool, number 3 on my keyboard, and I'm going to put a break right in this intersection. And then I'm going to do the same thing up at the top. Use the break tool, which is the number 3 on the keyboard, and put a small break. That allows me to isolate the walls from the remaining portion of the garage and the slab. Then, with the wall tool, I'm going to hold my shift key down and click and drag and create a marquee around the 4 walls that I'm interested in making the change with. I'll use the open button, and then on the foundation component, I'm going to come down and I'm going to center the footing. And you can kind of look at that right here in the dialog. I now have the footing centered on the wall. And in the section view, you can see that update, and now the footing is located exactly where I want. Now the next thing, I want to pull the walls up and have the framing hung inside of the platform. The walls are still selected. Let's go ahead and open them back up. You're going to find the setting underneath the structure panel to hang the floor platform above on the wall. And once I do that, you see in the section view, the walls now go up. To accommodate for the framing, I want to create a notch. Let's just zoom in here just a little bit using the zoom tool. I want to create a ledger that the framing can rest on. I'm also going to draw a furred wall that will be the bearing portion for the platform above. Let's begin with creating the ledger for the concrete wall. So I'm going to select the 2 opposing walls. And let's just hold our shift key down, and I'm going to grab both of those walls, and then let's go ahead and come in. I want to create on the wall types what's called a pony wall. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that it's a pony wall. The lower wall is a 8-inch stem wall, and then the upper wall I'm going to use as a 6-inch stem wall. And then the elevation for the wall type, I'm going to come in here. The subfloor is 3/4 of an inch. My floor joist is 14 inches. And then if I want a plate, that would be 1.5 inches. So if you add all that up, that would be a negative value because we're going down below the subfloor, 16.25 inches. In the section view, you can see the upper portion, the 6-inch width, and then the lower portion, the 8-inch, and then you see the cutout in here. Let's just build the floor framing so we can see the overlay of the floor joist. In the Build menu, underneath Framing, I'm going to come down and choose the foundation, and we're going to build the floor framing. In the section view, you can see that we've reserved space for the 1.5-inch plate. Floor joist is actually snug just underneath of the subfloor. To support the joist, in addition to the ledger, I'm going to create a furred wall right in this area. And to do that, let's move over into our floor plan. Underneath our wall tool, I'm going to double click on the interior wall tool to set the default wall type from an interior 4 to an interior one-sided. I've created a wall type in here that on one side is drywall. I've got a 2x4, and then I have an insulation air gap that is 1 inch. The program may notify you that you have the drywall on the exterior. That's okay. Before I draw the interior furred walls, I want to make sure that I can see the entire stem wall. If you take a look in this area right here, you only see a 6-inch stem wall as compared to an 8-inch stem wall. The two side stem walls are a pony wall with the ledger. The view for pony walls can be controlled through the Save Plan view. My current Save Plan view is using the floor plan shell that is hiding the lower part of that stem wall. Let me switch my plan view to the foundation, and a little later in the video I'm going to go through the steps of creating a Save Plan view. With the Save Plan view changed, as you zoom in, you now see the lower part of the wall and the upper part of the wall. The line represents the difference between the two walls. In the Save Plan view settings, there's an option for the pony wall display, and currently this Save Plan view is showing the upper wall and the lower wall outline. Now that the view displays both the upper and lower wall type, I'm going to come in, I'm going to use the interior wall that we set as our furred wall type, and I'm going to draw the first wall segment. That furred wall will now support the floor joist above. Before I continue drawing this wall around the rest of the perimeter, I'm going to double click on it and set it as a furred wall. So let me double click on the wall. Over on the structure panel is an option to mark the wall as a furred wall. That way, since we have a very small gap in between the stem wall and the furred wall, it's not going to create room definition and create odd situations where rooms compete against one another. So here pretty quickly I'm going to use the extend same handle, and we'll just come over here and I'm just going to slide this down in each way, and then I'm going to go ahead and bump it against the walls. Now before I bump the final wall over, notice that the ledger and the wall direction is on the opposite side where I want the ledger to occur. I'm going to click on the wall. I'm going to use the flip or reverse layers option. Zoom out just a little bit. Make sure that that alignment still looks good. So we'll just kind of pull this over, make sure that it snaps into place. That alignment is right where I want it, and then we'll go ahead and pull that wall over and snap it against the stem wall. Let's move over into the section view and zoom out and take a look. I don't have any wall framing built, so you can't see any of the plates, but I now have a supportive platform with fur walls with an inset into the concrete stem wall. Again, that platform is now hung. In this CAD detail for the foundation, you can see how the floor joist is supported and its interaction with the stem wall. I'd switched over and created a foundation view. And creating a foundation saved plan view, as we kind of zoom out, allows you to save your view on a specific floor. You can also set it up to include different layers and default settings. Let me close a few of the other views that I have going on. Let's talk about the process for creating a saved plan view and replicate this process so we can set some of the defaults up and build a few things to create a saved foundation view. Let's begin the process from the beginning. I'm going to switch the Save Plan view to one that ships with the program, and I'm just going to change it to the floor plan shell. Next to the drop down for the Save Plan view is a Save Active View As. I'm going to begin there. I'm going to click Save Active View As, and I'm going to give it the word Foundation. And since I already have an existing foundation Save Plan view, I'm just going to call it -1 for the purpose of the session. Once I've saved the foundation view, let's go into the Edit Active View properties. Saved plan views can be floor specific. They can also be zoom specific. For the foundation, I'm going to come in and instead of saying any floor, I'm going to have it go to the foundation. Anytime I change the Save Plan view, it will switch it to the foundation view. Now if you're saving this in your template plan and your template plan does not have a foundation, then you can leave it as any floor, and then as you go through the design and you decide to change it to be floor specific, you'll know where to find it underneath the general panel. There's a zoom option. If you zoomed in on a particular area, let's say you're designing a primary bathroom and you want to zoom in onto a large portion of the house specifically for the bathroom, zoom can be a helpful component so that it opens up directly to that area of the plan. A few other options: if you want to show the watermark, notice that my watermark is in the lower corner. That is Save Plan View specific. Now for the foundation, we were talking about being able to display the pony wall, which was the ledger wall that the floor joist fit into. I want to change the wall display to show more detail than the initial plan view that was the floor plan shell that I use for brochures. So in this case, I'm going to display the upper wall outline and the lower wall. There's a few other options. You can pick which one works best for you. On the next panel, for selected defaults, you can change the default set, which is a collection of all of the defaults below, or you can pick and choose and make minor changes. So I'm going to change the dimensions from the 1/4 inch, which are specific maybe to the floor plan dimensions. I'm going to come over and I'm going to click the option to create a new dimension default. And for the dimension defaults, and really for any of the other defaults that I change, I try to be specific and give them a good name. Now again, since I already have one for foundations, I'm going to call it Foundation 1. And in the specifics for how the dimensions are set up, you can change the way that these locate things. If you want to make an adjustment to the walls or the openings, this is where you can make those changes. The main function this particular case is I want to change the layer where the dimensions are going to be placed. And since I made a copy of the 1/4 inch dimensions, those are currently scheduled to go onto a layer called Dimensions Floor Plan. I want to change that to be something specific for the foundation. Click the drop down, and since I already have dimensions for the foundation created, I can select that. If you don't have that created, you can click the Define button and you can make a copy of this layer using the Copy button and then make any adjustments that you want to for this specific thing. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Dimensions Foundation, and then that will set up the dimensions. And then I'm going to do the exact same process for the text. I'm going to click the New Rich Text Default, and we're just going to come in here and I'm going to use the word foundation in the front, again being descriptive. Since I have one already called foundation, I'll just call it Foundation 1. You can change the font color, the font style. The main thing that I'm going to be doing in most of these cases is making sure I like to use this to control the layer these objects go on. And currently the layer default is set to go to the text layer. And again, when I annotate this, I want it to be able to be isolated so that it goes on a text foundation layer. So let's just click the drop down, and as I come in here and scroll down, you're going to see that I have a text foundation. To create a new layer, again, just click the Define button. You can make a copy of it using the Copy button, give it a name, and then you can choose exactly what it's going to go on. So I'm just going to repeat that one last time. For the simple text, we'll come in here, create a new text default. I'll give it a good name. We'll just call this Foundation 1. Again, I already have a foundation text. And then, again, one of the more important things in my situation is I want to control what layer it's going on instead of just a generic text. I like to isolate that through layers and layer sets. So I'm going to drop this down, scroll down until I find the foundation. Again, I've already created that. If you want to create a copy of it, I just showed you previously. So now If you want to go through and make changes to the rest of those, very similar process. If you wanted to make this a default set, a collection of these, you could use this option to create the word foundation. Once you've created a default set, you can see that at the top it's currently using the foundation. You can easily change these. If I switched it to a different setting, it comes down and changes all of those with one action at the top. That way you're not toggling individual ones at any given time. Let me switch that back to foundation. The last item for the Save Plan View is the layer set. I'll want to change this to a foundation layer set, and I'll do that through the Active Layer Display Options panel since it will be easier to create the new layer set. Let's come over and turn on the Active Layer Display. And you may not know what layers to turn on or off. Currently, the Save Plan View has been saved with the floor plan shell. And what I'm going to end up doing is I want to create a copy of this layer set and call it the foundation. You can see that I've actually already created one for the foundation previously, but what I might do is create a copy of this. We'll call it Foundation 1, and then you're going to want to turn on different layers. You may not know exactly what those are until you get into it. Let's go through the process and use the automatic exterior dimensions and go through and identify those things that need to be turned on. And the first thing that's going to pop up is the dimensions for the foundation layer is not displayed. Would you like to turn it on? And I'm going to say yes. That will turn on the dimension foundation layer. As you scroll down to the dimension area, you can see that layer is now turned on. And when it does that, I might just come up here and toggle off the floor plan shell since I made a copy of it from another layer set. And if you want to change the colors of the dimensions, clearly you can make adjustments. The default black color is being used. And as I go through and identify what layers need to be turned on or off, I'll slowly go through that process until I get it dialed in. And then my Save Plan View will have all of my favorite settings for a very specific view. So let's just go through and make sure that we click the Save button. And then when I switch the view, let's switch this back to the floor plan shell. This isn't floor specific, but let's move up to the first floor. You see the dimensions here, and then when I switch back to the foundation view that we've been working with, it's going to move us down to floor 0 since we saved it with the Save Plan View, and then those layers are going to be turned on, and then all of the active defaults or selected defaults are going to be positioned. So as you draw text and you place those items in your plan, it will be in the right layer. Let's just add some text in here. Again, it's going to prompt you to turn the text on, and we'll just type in foundation. So that comes in, and now that layer is turned on. Tap on it, you'll see it over here in the view. You might go through and just let's deselect that and search for the word text. You can see what text is turned on. You can see that we have the text for foundation turned on. You may want to turn off some of the other layers as long as you're in here and get it dialed in for that layer set and your Save Plan View. I like having a number of Save Plan Views. If I show you the drop down in my set, I have a number that are in addition to what we ship with. I've got a ceiling plan view. I've got an electric plan view. I've got one specifically for landscape, specifically for remodeling. They can save you a lot of time. It might take you a little bit of effort to set it up. Once you get it set up, save it in your template plan, and then you will have that for all of your future plans as you move forward in your design process. Well, that wraps up this session on foundations. Our next session will cover roofs and roof options for the project. Thanks for watching.
Okay. If you want to ask a live question, there's a raise hand option in the GoToWebinar control panel. When we call on your name, maybe just a quick introduction of your name, where you're calling from. And I would just ask, we had a lot of pre-submitted questions to try to focus on the topic of foundations. If you have another topic and we have a little bit of time at the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to take those. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carrie, and she's going to help manage the Q&A process for us.
Thanks, Scott. We have Scotty here with a question. Go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, Scott? I'm from the East Coast here, from Massachusetts, and
okay.
This segment was very informative, but there's definitely a couple of things I'd like to add. Well, not a couple. I mean, I only got time for like one or two, but and over here, one issue that I've noticed that we use a lot of is when we're doing full basements, and I've been trying to screw around with the chief architect with this. Like, I wanted to add footings with lolly columns, and I specifically can't really find anything for that. Sure, I can draw where I want to put my beam, but I would like to try to place footings with lolly columns in my foundation plan.
Okay, so you just want to be able to put a separate footing for those columns? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, so that way I can divide as needed or where I want to place that lolly column in my basement.
Okay, sure. Well, let's see if we can go in, and let me just open up the plan here. If you zoom in to the foundation, I've got a couple of footings that I placed for the purpose of some posts that are coming down to carry load.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take a 3D view, let's see if this is similar to what you're after here. And let's kind of tip this up. So you see how I have those footings underneath there? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes.
Okay. So the tool you can do, there's a few different ways that you can do this, but specifically, this is a footing for a post. And when you're underneath of the framing tool, you'll see a post with footing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that okay off to the side?
Yes.
So that's one way. You can just delete the post or keep the post. And then also you'll find other tools. You could use a solid tool, change the line style, and then dimension it as you need to for the positioning of these things.
Okay, so for the steel column, then for the purpose of this, if I was doing the footing with the steel column, is there an option for steel column? Because all I see is like just a regular wood post.
Sure. Let's go up. Let me just switch this over to my framing view. We're going to cover framing here in a few weeks, but if I switch this over to our framing view and you come up, you can see that I actually have an I-beam in here with a couple of the posts. So those posts are on the floor above. And if we peek at the framing view here, you can change those posts. Let's kind of zoom in here. Let me switch that. I probably have a structural view here. I'll kind of eliminate some of the things here. So you see how I have those posts over here, right, that are being carried?
Yes.
And when you open up the post, you can choose the material or the type that it is. So on the general panel, there's a drop down with the framing member type. Do you see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and as well, you can go over onto the label panel and call it whatever you want if you want to type in a very specific label, and you know, whether it's an HSS post or whatever it needs to be.
Okay. Now, how about if I wanted to, well, not for the purpose of this, not for a lolly column footing, but like if I'm on making a deck and I wanted to do a sonotube, because and Chief Architect, when it automatically generates everything for you, I notice it likes to go towards square footings. If I wanted to make it like a sonotube or a Bigfoot, what would be the process for that?
That setting, you see this round versus square?
Oh, wow. Okay, I missed that. Yep.
Yeah,
There's
so you
many
can
options.
yeah, you can just switch that so that you can change it for the view.
All right. Excellent. No, that was pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling in today.
Well, thank you.
You bet.
Scott, our next question is from Larry. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, hey, Scott. It's Larry from San Diego. Great presentation as usual. I just learned so much. I really, really appreciate it. My question came from when you set the furred walls into the full height basement. And with the stem wall, the TJI on the right-hand side of the section looked like it lined up appropriately. On the left-hand side, it looked a little muddled.
Okay.
That's the best way I can say it, but it didn't line up the same. And sometimes those little things will kind of make you nuts trying to look. And hopefully I remembered it correctly. I'm not sure if I did.
Yeah, let me go up and grab should be a saved camera. Let's just make sure that I have that okay. So let's just open up that section view and just take a peek and see if we can dial in what we're looking at here. Of course, that's a stairwell. Let's take a new section through here because that's not showing it. Let's pull that back. Okay.
Is that correct on that left-hand side?
Yeah, let's take a peek. Yeah, it
We
looks
see
like
that there's a difference there, right? Sometimes when we're working on sections
Yeah.
and stuff, you know, trying
So it
to get that view to be just right as can be
Yeah,
a little bit of a pain.
looks okay on the right, and then when we
I think
slide
so,
over onto the left, it looks like I've got a small difference on that stem wall. So what we might do, I'm not sure, I didn't notice that earlier, but if we open up the far right stem wall and we just take a peek at I did that through the pony wall option,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yeah, I think so, yes.
So currently the upper wall that it's serving as that ledger that we look at
Mhm.
is set at minus 12.5 inches or 12 5/8 inches, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's switch over and see what this wall's set at, just out of curiosity. Okay, let's paste that in there. My bad. And let's go back into the view and see if that will update it. Does that look better, Larry?
Yes, there is additional vertical line.
Yeah,
Right.
so it looks like, you know, I need to pull that TGI back. Probably a little bit sloppy on my end. So that now it sits right.
Okay, awesome.
Does that
That's
work?
great. Sometimes I'll spend an hour and a couple of posts on Chief Talk to get that figured out. I really appreciate you doing that so
Yeah.
quickly. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Derek. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
This is Derek from Houston. I've got a couple questions for you. We do the vast majority of our foundations are pier and beam with usually 36-inch bells and a 12-inch pier. What's the best way of going about building one of those foundations?
So when you build your foundations, there's an option to build it on pier. Do you use that option, Derek?
I don't.
Okay. So when you build your foundation on pier, and here's a variation of the foundation I had built on pier, which I just kind of used the default settings.
Okay.
So when you build it, then all of those objects can be manipulated. So you could, you know, pull the wall over. You could copy and paste those piers. Comes in at the right elevation. I usually start there with the automatic pier tool, and you can find that tool when you go in to your build foundation option. And when you go to build with piers, you'll see that option right here.
Okay.
So if you start there and let the program build it, make sure that you have, you know, your height set according for your, you know, your wall heights. And then if you reach a moment of weakness, there's always the help button down in the lower section of the menu. And it will kind of give you the ins and outs of how that tool works and what you can do to modify it.
Okay.
And then when you place your beams, then you can position those, you know, when you draw a beam and open it up, if we, you know, take a peek at the framing overview in here, then those beams come in at the right elevation. Let's go ahead and turn on our framing view. So switch it to the 3D framing. Then those beams will come in, you know, at the right level, and then you can bear them on, you know, wherever you need to exactly position those.
Okay, so how would you add just extra beams and piers throughout the entire structure? You know, make
So
more of a
once-
checkerboard pattern.
Yeah, so when you have the design, I'm going to do floor framing here in a few weeks. But if I switch this view over to the floor framing view that we were just looking at, and let's just assume that I'm going to throw another beam in here. Then I come up underneath the tool for the floor framing, and there is a option over here for a floor and ceiling beam.
Mm-hmm.
See that okay? So
Yeah.
let's just assume that I just cut a new beam across the top there, right? And that's probably going to come in line with the other joist. If I need to move it down the thickness of that joist, then I can push that down 14 inches or whatever it turns out those joists are. And then you can either copy that or draw another one, whatever works easiest for you. And then when you build your foundation with piers, then once you've set the dimensional heights of those, then I usually just use the copy tool because they've come in at the right elevation. And if you need to modify them based on terrain differences, then you can click on them in an elevation view and adjust them.
Okay, so there's really no way of adding that beam to have it automatically place the piers underneath of it when you're building the foundation.
If you mark this as a bearing beam, one of the options is, you mark it as a bearing beam. Then there are some options. If the program, it's going to look at the span of the pier objects, and then you may, if it didn't place them for you, just grab the copy tool and use the multiple replicate so that they're, on center based on what you think those should be.
All right. And then is there an option for putting bells on the bottom of those piers?
Like a footing of some sort?
Yeah. We typically, will drill a 12-inch pier with a 36-inch bell on the bottom of it.
Sure.
So you've got more bearing surface.
Yeah, so you can either use the footing tool, or you could draw that as a custom polyline solid and add it to your library, and then multiple copy that. So that'd be an option too.
Okay, but there's no option in a pier.
Yeah, once you've drawn a pier, we don't have a bell option for that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And then if you've got an elevated crawl space instead of a subterranean crawl space, how do you get it to elevate? I'm sure it's just a dimension somewhere.
Sure, you can click in your room and you can change the room height. So if we, I don't have room definition there, but if we were to click in the room, and I'm just going to pick on one of these rooms here. If you click in the room and you go onto the structure panel, you can change the floor heights in here.
Okay.
So if you needed to raise it up and adjust it according to changing, if it's elevated, as you mentioned, then you could just, raise that up. Right now it's giving us a 8-foot basement, but you could easily come in here and raise this up.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That was it on that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for checking in today.
All right, Scott, our next caller is D. Scott Hall. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Question for you on foundations. I end up building having a crawl space, and I want to manually add a mono slab adjacent to it, keeping the height of the mono slab to be the same elevation as the height of the existing crawl space. And what I find a lot of times is the stem wall that's against the mono slab raises up to the height of the mono slab, to the top of the mono slab. So the floor joist won't sit on it anymore. That's the issue I'm having.
Okay. Thanks for calling in today, Scott. It's been a while since we've talked to you. Hopefully we're going to see you in Coeur d'Alene this summer for our Chief Academy.
Oh, looking forward to it. Bringing the wife too.
Yeah, good. Okay, so let's take a peek. I have something, I think, similar to that. And I've got a situation here. If we take a peek at this, is this true? Let me see if I have an example of that so we can see what we've got going on here.
I think you could probably build a real quick 20 by 20 room, put a raised floor on top of it, and then manually build your mono slab next to it if you want. It's really basic, I think.
Yeah, let me just see. I thought I had an example here. Let me just grab
Okay.
one real quick. There we go. And let's switch over to our foundation plan. Okay. So here's a condition where off to the right in the blue is a new mono slab. And on the left is an existing crawl space foundation. Is that floor plan?
Yes. Can we look at that foundation in 3D?
Yeah. So if we take a peek at this, then the subfloor should equal, once you put a sheet of plywood on there, the subfloor should equal the top of slab.
No. Yes, but I want my floor joist to sit on the stem wall. You don't have that right now.
Okay, well let's switch over and make sure if I have a view here. So these are hung in this case.
Yes, and I don't want them hung.
Okay, in that case, you would need to stack them, right? And so I'd change my wall type. And then over here, you want the slab to be flush with your floor joist. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in that case,
Yes.
what I would end up doing is raising the room height off to, let's see if I can grab the room over here. So let's come in and open up this room. And I'd end up raising that floor, I don't know what, 15 inches or something like that?
No, wait, you've already defined I want the existing finished floor to be the same elevation as the new finished floor.
Right.
And now you're changing it.
Right. So I would raise, because the existing condition is your floor joists that are already in the field, right?
Sitting on the stem wall.
Yeah. So that's going to raise that floor up, give it a number, 15 inches or something, right?
Okay.
On the left side. So on the right side, I need to raise this floor up that same amount. Does that make sense at all?
I see it as you dropping the existing concrete stem wall down 6 inches for the floor joist and the sill plate to sit on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Let me close that.
You have your floor joist hanging off of the stem wall. I don't want them hanging off the stem wall. I want them sitting on top, right there.
Right. Yeah. So what I don't necessarily have time to go through and change all of this, but what I ended up doing is modifying the wall, right, so that it's not hung, step one. So I would build the foundation so that these are not hung walls, right? So I'd remove the check mark down here that says it's hung. So then those floor joists are stacked on top of the concrete wall. Effectively, that's going to raise this floor up on the left-hand side of the structure 15 inches.
So can I ask you then, can you just select that wall that's between the mono slab and the existing foundation and select that particular concrete stem wall and uncheck that? And that one will change, I would think.
It might. Again, I don't, there's several walls in here that would affect the framing. So I would probably go through. That's
sort of my point. Okay, anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, that's sort of the point I'm trying to make. The stem wall is existing, and then I come back in, I manually build the slab, and that's where I'm having a problem.
Okay. Why don't you send it in, and we'll just take a quick peek at it. Just send it to sales at Chief Architect. Sales at Chief Architect.
Okay.
Yeah, send it in, and we'll take a quick peek at it. And I know you're a knowledgeable user, but I'll adjust it and send it back to you, and then you can give me a critique.
Sounds great. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for calling in.
You bet.
Scott, our next question comes from Russell. Hi, Russell. Go ahead and ask your question.
I noticed when you did your furred walls in the cellar that maybe I missed it. Did you check no room definition? Because I've done this in the past many times. In fact, I'm working on a project now. There is in the wall definition, you can make it a furred wall, but the problem I have there is up here in Massachusetts, we have to drop the footing down 48 inches below the grade, in this case, below the cellar slab for a walkout, and then that furred wall is traveling down with it. So what I've been doing is exactly what you've been doing, what you showed here, Scott, is I draw the foundation wall, pony wall or not, and then I'll draw an interior wall and I'll call it a 2x interior 4 furred. But when I slide it over or I stretch it out and connect it to the ends, it's going to create a room. And then I have these funky little rooms all the way around that have 0 dimension. So did I miss that when you did it here in this demo?
So let me turn those walls on.
Can I just offer one comment to some of the other people that have raised questions? I discovered last year a catalog download in the bonus catalogs called Posts and Pier Systems and things like that. It has the round Bigfoot, you know, the pyramidal tapers. It's got the square ones. It's got helical piers. Very nice setup. So that could solve some problems.
Yeah, thanks for offering that. I don't actually have that catalog downloaded. I'd open it up. Yeah, you're right. So there's a couple ways that you can do your stem wall. And when I take a section with a furred wall, I drew my furred wall separate of the foundation wall. So there's actually 2 wall types in here.
Yes.
And when you set it, I find that you could build this as one wall and build all the layers for the framing and the concrete. But I find that you have a little better control of where the furred wall is going to be, especially when it's spanning the platform correctly, right?
Yeah.
And when I drew that particular wall, I marked it as a furred wall. So when you open that up and you come over onto the structure panel, there is the option to mark that as a furred wall. Once you mark it as a furred wall in the program, then we know that the room definition, because if I don't mark that as a furred wall and there's a 1-inch gap, it's an air gap for the insulation, right? That it thinks that there's maybe this 1-inch room that could go all the way around it, and a room within a room, so to speak, in the program isn't an ideal situation. In fact, it can kind of confuse it a little bit.
I've noticed.
Yeah. And maybe interesting things can happen. Let's just say that at best. Yeah. So when you mark this wall as furred wall, then it helps the program understand the intent of that. As we zoom in a little bit closer, is exactly as you might build it for a foundation and a basement that's enclosed with those furred framed walls. And you're going to get a better structure connection, because sometimes that wall, if you build it as one single wall, my footing extends down, and I probably could make a bigger footing to support that, but that wall may extend down into the footing. If it's a singular wall, and the platform probably wouldn't build quite the way I'd want it. So I usually use a separate wall, a little bit more work, but it is structurally more accurate when you cut your sections.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ.
Scott, let's check in with Charles one more time. Charles, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, in coastal South Carolina, we have a situation similar to Houston, but typically we do a 16-16 CMU filled column with a 24 by 24 footing, but we have to have a 12 by 12 continuous footing between the 24 by 24 footings. Is there a way to draw that?
So you can make your footings any width you want. If I understand your question correct, Charles, where you have maybe a certain wall that has a thicker footing or a wider footing.
Well, typically it's, we have to be 14 feet above, mean high tide. So generally the houses are, at least coastal houses are built on piers,
Right.
like you're talking. And
Right.
under the pier, you have a square footing.
Mm-hmm.
But then between those square footings, you have to have a continuous footing.
Okay.
Going, you know, but it's smaller. It's 12 by 12 instead of 24.
Okay.
So
So if we slide over, I've got a couple footings. Well, I had them. Let me switch back over to my foundation view. So I have a couple of footings right here, right? That could serve as a pier. And if I were to move one of those, you're suggesting that you have a continuous footing that would go between these. Is that right?
exactly, that's exactly right.
Okay. So all I'm going to do is make a copy of that existing footing. Okay. Pull it
Yeah.
back. Would this footing be underneath of the other one?
No, same level.
Okay. And that's it? Something like that?
That's pretty much it, except it's smaller. It's 12 by 12 instead of,
Okay.
you know, so yeah,
So-
it's small, exactly, that's it.
So we pull it in something like that?
So just do another footing and make it a long, oblong. I got it. That's simple.
Does that work?
Yep,
Upside down, but is that what you're after?
that is exactly what I'm after. Of course, it's my floor is above that because I've got.
I understand. Right, I understand.
That makes it pretty easy.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet, Charles.
All right, Scott, our next question is from Marge. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Marge from Reed Springs, Missouri. I'm still working on this style house. It has this intersection is 20 feet wide, and they're going to be load-bearing walls. And when I do the auto foundation, it puts a full stem wall. I have a 48-inch stem wall on top of the footing.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking that what you did on those walls in the earlier, could I take those and change those from the full stem wall to a pier and post?
Yeah, if
Just on those two walls.
Marge, we built that horse barn a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I've been waiting for the foundation class.
Yeah. And so if some of those walls need to be pier walls, right?
Yeah, those two in the middle.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
would have the normal frame, and then just those two in the middle. I believe I can just do pier so that we can actually access the whole crawl space.
Right. Right.
In Missouri, it's going to act as a tornado shelter also.
Uh-huh. Right. And so, you know, one of the things you can do when you build your foundation, let me just see if I don't have one handy here. Do we have a pier, any of the chief staff members out there, do we have a pier wall type, or is there an easy way to create one without building a whole foundation?
You'd probably just do a beam there and then just add a post with footing. So just for a pier foundation.
Okay. Let me just get a plan that has no foundation. So if we go in to build the foundation, let's grab this and let's change this to be grade beers and beam, slab thickness, and minimum height. We'll set it to be 48 or so. Let's see what that looks like. So then there's the pier depth shape, right?
Okay.
And so if you zoom in, you can kind of see those piers. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then if you want a separate, if we just peek at it in 3D, so there's how we built that, right? So if you want a separate style of foundation, we could come in here, let's grab that and we'll just pull this wall over. And then I could mark this portion of the foundation to be a crawl space, and the rest of it would be on pier. So I could just go in here and ceiling height, room, so that is reasonable. And then change the rest of the walls maybe to have a footing, and then delete the piers off of them. The way you delete those piers off of them, just highlight them, delete them, right? And then those would remove the piers off of there. And then you can change this wall, or all of the walls that are appropriate on the foundation. You could put a slab footing on it. And it looks like, let's see what wall height thickness is. Go back there and put the footing on there, and then you've got your footing set up that way. Does that work for you?
And that's what's going around the whole exterior of the house. But the ones I'm talking about are going through the middle.
Right.
So can I take them from that stem wall to the piers, just that section of them?
Okay, so let's assume that, and then I'll turn it over here. Let's assume that this is a pier that's going through the middle of your house.
Okay.
Then what I would do, let's put maybe 4 piers through here, and I'm just going to pull those in the middle of it like that.
Gotcha.
Okay, and somebody had a comment they wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest underneath the slab tools under the build menu, there's an option for round piers and square piers. She might try just manually placing those if it's only in a few select areas she needs them.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, so here, I think here's what Phil is pointing out. There's the round pier. I like to use them. Yeah, it needs to be placed underneath a pad. I like to let the program kind of build the foundation, because then it comes in with the right elevation. But this is also another way that you could then place those specifically for as a one-off.
Okay. I did go ahead and do it automatically, and I just didn't think the family would want to have 3 different openings and to the crawl space. So
sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Marge.
Scott, we have Mark here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Scott.
Hi, Mark.
I've got a unique problem here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
We do slabs on foundation with stem walls. We need a monolithic slab for load-bearing walls, and Chief won't do it.
So let's make sure we understand your question here. So you have, you're using a stem wall to build your slabs, and in some places you need a load-bearing wall to have an additional slab footing underneath of it. Is that right?
Correct. It's like the monolithic slab beams. It's the way it's drawn. It's got a 45 on the bottom. It's only a thickened 8-inch slab. Does that make sense to you?
Possibly. Let's see if we can get into a situation here where I can understand what you're looking at. In this example that I have, this is a mono slab, okay, ish. When I build a mono slab, I actually use stem walls to do it.
Okay.
So if you were to look, let's see if this is true, at my foundation, my slab thickness is 4 inches, right?
Correct.
My stem wall height is 6 inches.
Okay.
And by the time you add the foam, the rigid foam underneath of there, it's easier for me to manage that. Okay.
Okay.
And so if you have a need for maybe underneath of here, you have a need for a bearing wall to continue all the way across.
Well, let me help you out here, because I think this is where the problem comes in. I've got a 1-foot stem wall on top of my footing.
Okay.
So the 1-foot stem wall, in other words, your picture doesn't work because the footing's actually down 12 inches from a stem wall.
Okay, so your stem wall is popping up 1 inch above here, right?
No, it's at the bottom of the slab because the slab sits on top of the stem wall, or flush with the stem wall. But my minimum stem wall is 12 inches.
Okay.
So that's what happens is when you try and put a slab footing underneath the slab, it does weird things because it tries to put a stem wall on top of it.
Okay.
My workaround is I'm using a 3.5 inch stem wall for my thickened slab beams and just showing the footing, even though I know it's not right 3D graphics. Nobody ever going to look at it but me.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's basically an 8 inch thickened slab with 45s at the bottom.
Okay.
2 foot wide.
Okay. Mark, why don't you do me a favor, because I'm still having a little bit of hard time to wrapping my head around it, and I have a few more questions out there.
Okay.
Why don't you send me a diagram or a picture or something that you have, and mark it up on the way you'd like it, and let me take a peek at it so that I can better understand your situation. Then I'll send it back to you.
Okay. How do I send it to you? Through sales?
Just send it to sales at Chief Architect, and put in the title of it, foundation question.
For Scott.
Yeah. There's probably a lot smarter people out there that'll probably answer your question, but yeah, we'll look at it.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Scott, our next question is from Naaman Garg. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. This is Naaman again from Uvalde, Texas, about 80 miles west of San Antonio. How are you doing today?
Good. Very good. Thanks for calling in.
Great. Thanks. Hey, so on the foundations, I have a question, and I also wrote that in, but it had just, pre-questions had just limited area to type my question in, so I kind of abbreviated it. The question is, we do, in this part, I do generally slab on grade, which has like beams, like a waffle slab would be my best example to say it. So it's like perimeter beams are 12 inches by 36 inches, plus or minus. And then there are interior beams of similar size, and then there's like a 5-inch slab.
Okay.
That goes with it. And then I have porches in the front and things like that. My issue with that was like when I'm doing porches and I'm doing those elevations or I'm doing like sections, it does not show a beam running under the porch because the roof line is on that porch wall or the porch foundation wall. It has to be there. So what I ended up doing was I started doing like garage and then drop that down like say 3.5 inches and rename it to be like to be a porch. But sometimes it gives me difficulties with the slab. It kind of makes it a pool kind of a situation, or like a tub kind of a situation, because the walls from the foundation, they kind of rise up. So I have to kind of go back and forth playing and tweaking. And I was wondering if there's like a simpler way to kind of address the whole thing, like all perimeter beams are grade beams, 36 inches deep, 12 inches wide, and a slab which is like 5 inches thick with a drop down at the garages and the porches.
Right. So when you when you build your foundations, are you selecting use monoslab, or what are you using to build the foundation?
Right, monoslab.
On slab. Have you tried building it with a stem wall that looks like a slab? So this is what I've done in this case. And when you build the foundation, I think I was showing this to the last caller here. What I've done here is I set the slab thickness and then the stem wall, which is really the footing.
I think that is how I'm doing it. And there's another issue with this one is that every time I do that, the footing always shows a back, I turned that off in my defaults and that
Okay.
footing comes on. But I mean, as for in the bigger scheme of things, that doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I drop that with a garage, you know how you are seeing that that double line on the top, that kind of just stays there, and the inside becomes like a top. Yeah, right where your mouse is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because my garage room is slightly below the
Right.
stem wall, right? In
Right.
this case.
Right.
I've also got it set to the vector style view, and that's why you're seeing that additional line.
Right. Right.
But you'd prefer to see your porch, because this is a front porch. Well, I actually don't have it turned on. So I didn't build the porch foundation out here, right? I can turn
Right.
that layer on. I separated out in this case. I'm not sure if this is, oh, that's probably up a level. Let me go up here. Yeah, I separated that out and put it on the floor above and just drew it this way. And this is supportive. This actually has no structure, so you can see I just drew that as a separate slab.
Right. Right. And then like in my cross sections, I don't see that 36-inch peripheral beam because my roof, it supports like with columns or something like that. It comes on that slab, and that slab needs to have those grade beams. So essentially that waffle slab extends to the extent of the edges of the slab, of the slab that you have created.
Okay, so the foundation would need to go out and basically remove this one that I drew, and your foundation needs to come out. Yeah. Well, usually I'd have to take a look at it. Usually what I would do in the room definition is set that to be a porch and build it. When you build your foundation, then if it's set to be a porch, it'll come in at the same elevation as the rest of your slab.
It will. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, unless you lower it. And I've done that. I just didn't, in this case, I didn't want a footing out where these columns were because it wasn't necessary, because that's what's going to carry the load of the roof. Why don't you, if you're okay with it, send me your plan in and let me take a look at it. And then I have a little bit more time to manage your question.
Will do. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Robin Stewart's here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Robin.
Hi, Scott. This is Robin calling from beautiful Vermont. How are you?
Hi, Robin. Good to hear from you.
I haven't been on in a while. Well, you just started these back up again. So I have hopefully this is a super quick question. Of course, I live in a very hilly state, and we don't always have very flat building sites. And we do vastly more remodels than we do anything else in additions. So my question for you today is, oftentimes we're really staggering floor heights. An example I would have is garages can be a step down. We're coming, sometimes 2 to 4 steps into a garage. So I tend to do my foundations, after I have my floor plans done or my as-builts done, so they're last, and I have all my wall heights and everything correct. So in one case, I'm working on a floor plan that the slab for the garage is actually 28 inches down from the house and doesn't even connect to the house. So we're going to put an annex onto the house, an addition on, so we can have some step ups and access the garage from the house. However, all my heights are perfect. Everything looks good, all my room heights. And as soon as I go to build foundations, it gets really pissed off, the program, that that the floor for the garage is 28 inches lower than the house. So it takes that stem wall, even though I don't have that, I have a slab for the garage, and it ends up throwing this stem wall on top of the slab foundation for the garage. So I have this concrete, ledge that goes around the perimeter of the garage, and I can't get rid of that. So just
And you'd like to, I guess.
And I'd really like it to go away. That would be super helpful.
Yeah. So I have a plan, and it's not necessarily like probably the one you're building, but it does have a different step. And if we kind of peek at this, let's look at it in 3D here and see if this is maybe similar to.
I will mention one thing is that the ceiling height of the garage is, you know, less than 100 inches, and the if I make the ceiling height taller in the garage, then the program isn't as snarky about it. But yes, that's exactly what I'm looking at, where the garage is several steps down from the house. Correct.
Right. And so if we zoom in here, right, we've got a set of steps that go up into the house.
Yep. Yep. And so I'm trying to put an addition on, and we have those steps going up, and that's exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that stem wall that goes around the perimeter of the garage. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, if we peek at this, let's look at the foundation only here. Let's actually look at this in 3D. It'll probably be a little bit easier. So here's the situation with this particular foundation, right?
Yep.
If you look at the room, I'm just going to double click on the room for the foundation. You can see that, first of all, I've lowered the floor 28 inches. So this floor is obviously 28 inches lower than the subfloor of the main house. Okay. And when you kind of mouse over these different things, the dimension turns red over here, and you can see what's going on over here. And I actually have the footing extending down further, which is my stem wall height. So you got my stem wall height to 28 inches. And then I've lowered the floor to stem wall to get that in there. And then my ceiling, which looks like it's 114 or so, is lowered 24 inches. So a little bit different dimension. And then you take your section view and make sure that those all line up. And sometimes it takes a little bit of, I like to use the section view and the elevation views to make sure that these things are coming into play, so that when you are going to lower the room height, let's see if I have a section view in here. Yeah, here's one. Let's peek at this section view and see if that gives us enough information. Yeah, right. So here's the step up, and there's our subfloor. I don't know that I have any magic for you, Robin, but if you, this is a sample plan, you could download it. It's called the Grand View on our website.
Okay.
And if you just wanted to open it up and kind of look at the different settings on how that plays in, you could just build a sample, quick sample to lower something 24 inches or whatever your number is.
Well, I have exactly what you have on there. So when you go into your 3D view inside the garage, you see that perimeter, you see the perimeter stem wall. And so, you know, I'm putting, what's happening is I'm putting an addition off of the garage. And so the foundation continues this perimeter stem wall around that. And, you know, I want it to be sheetrocked with moldings, and I don't want to see, you know, that I don't want to see the stem wall inside this finished and now conditioned room. So,
you
but
don't
when
want
you
to see the stem wall in your garage?
I'm sorry?
You don't want to see the stem wall inside the garage when you're in?
That's correct. That's correct. And that's what you're showing is exactly what I have. So if you go into the 3D view again and you see the concrete stem, you see the concrete, right there, like underneath the doors and all around, where you see that, that's exactly what I'm looking at. And I don't want to see that in the garage or in the new addition.
So you want the sheetrock to come all the way down?
Yep. And I want room moldings. Yep.
Yeah. Well, in that case, build a wall type, assuming that you still have concrete right here, right?
Yeah.
That needs to be supportive. Build a wall type that has a stem wall with a drywall sheetrock or framed wall on the outside of it. Okay.
Got it.
And then in your room, you can come in here and turn on the moldings, right?
Yep.
and then come in and just say add a new molding, and we'll just
Good
grab
enough.
one.
Good enough. Okay, so I guess I didn't even think about building a new wall type, but I can certainly do that. I have my own catalog of wall types. Good enough.
Okay.
That was the answer I needed. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Scott, our next question is from Alan. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Scott, my name's Alan. I'm calling from Cape Cod. What I need to find out how to do is, and you sort of touched on it in that last demonstration, is to set my garage up so that the top of foundation does not come up to floor level. But when we build them here in the east, generally our foundation tops for the garage are equal, so that you step it, like in the case you just showed. Am I able to do that in my template plan?
So Alan, is this the style of garage you're talking about here, where you step up to get into the house? Or you
Right, exactly.
Okay,
but
yeah.
When I go to build foundations, what I describe as a garage room, that the top of that foundation wall is equal to, it is not equal, but is above the top of the living area foundation.
Okay. So I'm just building a simple plan here, and I'm going to mark this as a garage room. And on the structure panel, you can see right now they're equal because I don't yet have a foundation, because there's no foundation yet. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got a garage now, and let's make sure. Okay. So one side I have a garage, on the other side I have a living space. Now, when I go in to build the foundation, and we build it with, let's say, just a crawl space, at the very bottom are my options for my garage.
Okay.
And right now, my default is to lower that 3.5 inches.
All right.
So when I build the garage or the foundation, and then we look at this, it's stepping down 3.5 inches. So you can change your template plan, your room type, I think it is. Where is this setting? And you want that to step down further? Is that the way I understand it?
Well, yeah, I don't want the top of my garage foundation to be above the house foundation.
Right. And so in this case, it's very close. I think, what is it? 3.5 inches, 2.5 inches, right?
Yeah.
If we zoom in there, that's 2 inches below. So if you want it to be, let's say, 12 inches.
So, typically our garages are going to be a 48-inch stem wall.
Okay.
And the generally we allow 12 to 18 inches to the top of the slab.
Okay.
On the top of that stem wall. But as I say, if I denote it as a garage and then go to build foundations, the foundation for the garage is equal to the floor level of the main house.
Okay. And you want it as a default to build the typical way you build it.
Right.
Maybe something like that. Let me pause here. I'm not, let me see if that default setting is in our room types. Brian or Al, are you out there? Is that setting in our room types, or where should I look?
Which setting are you looking for, Scott?
how to set the garage elevation floor and with respect to the stem wall.
It's in the foundation defaults, or when you build foundation, you should see it there.
Okay, so if we go back into our foundation.
So it's that garage floor to stem wall top. That's going to control how far down the slab is relative to the top of the stem wall.
Okay. And let's go ahead and rebuild it and see if that sets it up. Okay. So, Alan, it looks like if you go into your default settings and over to foundation and towards the bottom down here,
garage options.
take a look at, in this case, this is where your garage floor is going to be with respect to the top of the stem wall.
Okay.
So set that to the number that you would use and see if that, solves your request. Now, if your stem wall height's different than your main floor, right, then you may need to, after you build your foundation, because it may change, you can always click in the room and adjust those stem walls for that particular room.
Okay, and it looks as though one of the keys to this is building the foundation, build foundation first, and then denote the garage later, and then, as you say, go to garage options.
So the typical process is on your floor plan, name the room a garage first.
Okay.
Before you build the foundation. When you name a room, and a garage has special properties, when you build the foundation after it's been named, then the program will apply the settings for that particular room type, and that's what's going to happen down here if you change those values. So be sure to set the room type of garage before you build the foundation.
Okay. All right. Now I understand.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Kareem. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, yeah. I'm calling from the Caribbean.
Oh.
I live in Antigua. I've really enjoyed your session. Never missed one yet. I have a question. We typically do houses here on what we call either pillars or columns.
Okay.
It's similar to the piers, right? Mm-hmm. But the way it generates the sill plate in that condition without having to do it manually, because I've tried it and it doesn't work. So I've resorted to using like a bearing line, but it then gives me the framing because I've used the post feature, the post with footing, and I've just deleted the post and used that whole thing. But what happens is it still doesn't generate automatically. It doesn't generate a foundation because I guess it doesn't recognize it as a rule. If I use stem walls, the strip footings foundation, it generates the framing, but it's enclosed. I don't know if I'm explaining properly. So what I want to do is to know if I can get it using pillars, using the post feature, and get a foundation generated and still have that sill plate showing up.
Okay. Kareem, you're cutting out a little bit, and I'm not sure I fully understood your question, but let me repeat this and see if I have part of it right. You build your foundations with pier, and when you create the pier foundation, you want a sill plate, or do you not want a sill plate?
Yes, I want a sill plate. But
you want a sill plate?
I do not use the piers. I generally try to use the columns. Okay. The post feature, right? Post feature.
Oh, so you just use the posts?
Yeah, but I have to use the bearing line feature to create framing. Because if I lay out the post onto the building, it's not recognizing it as a foundation, basically.
Ah.
So
Okay, so if
yeah.
so are you manually building all of your foundation components using posts?
Well, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much, because there's no way to generate it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one way, I'm not sure if this is a great solution for you, but if I were to come in to build the foundation, I would build them on piers, figure out what the height of your piers are. So let's go ahead and we'll just set something in here, 48 by 48. Build the foundation, and then you don't want the walls, right? You just want the posts, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So if I come in here and I now delete the walls, that's going to delete, I bet that's going to delete my posts. Yeah, that's going to delete my posts. Undo that. Okay. Who has a good suggestion here? I know this is kind of weird to set those to be invisible, but let's take a peek and see what this does. Where are my piers? Yeah, that makes them invisible. Undo that. Okay, so one of the things you're going to need to do if you want those posts on a separate floor is you need to build a foundation. You can build a blank foundation plan, right? When you build your foundation, you can mark it to build. When you build a foundation, you can say make a blank plan, right? And that will give you a foundation floor. I'm going to go ahead and build the foundation so I know where the walls are particularly. And then when you use your post tool, let's come in for the post tool. And I'll place a post here. And then that way it will allow me to, let's go ahead and put in just a handful of these, maybe 4 posts across here. Okay. And then I can basically remove the walls. And you can also, if I delete all of the walls out of here, I'm just going to use the wall tool, surround them, delete them. You can always turn on what's called reference display and then use this tool so you can position those posts. And when you take a 3D overview of this, here's what you're going to get, right? And then if you want a plate or a beam on top of there, then you could draw your beam so that it would then bear for the walls above that.
Scott?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Al.
You could also just use the grade beam on pier standard automatic foundation and just start changing some of the parameters. Like instead of having the 37.5-inch stem wall, you might only have 6 inches or whatever beam you're using. You can also change the wall style to a 4 or 6 inch wall and set the piers accordingly, for height and things like this. So it doesn't have to be concrete. You can use different wall type. And then you can actually get the foundation to look the way you want it. And then when you build the framing, you're going to get the sill and everything else on top of it automatically.
Okay.
So, but basically you're building a beam on pier, a grade beam on pier foundation.
Okay.
You're making the stem wall really, narrow or not. It's not 37.5. It might be whatever beam you have on top of the piers. Okay. So that's a possibility too. Yeah, there you go. Something like that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I've tried using the piers, but what happens is that the piers, that beam falls in the center of each pier, which gives me a lift, and I want it to be flush with the wall. And that is my problem using the piers. Posted footing feature. Because the piers give me, see how it is there. It, has an overlapping, there's no way to move it.
Set the radius of the piers. Set the width of the piers equal to the wall thickness.
Oh, yeah, but but I need like a 10-inch, it should be 10 inches. Yeah, so that's my problem. I'm trying to figure out a way to get it done without having to do it manually, drawing in. So what I resorted to do was to use it just as Scott, use a general regular strip footing setup, create the framing, and then delete the walls, which would then leave the framing in this position my post on it, in line with it to suit. That's what I resorted to do. Because, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to get it done automatically as opposed to have to do it manually every time.
Sure. Kareem, why don't you send me your plan in? We'll look at it. Let me know what you would like the outcome to be. I'm not going to commit that we can solve it, but you can go ahead and send it into sales at Chief Architect and we'll look at it.
Okay.
Sound okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Sure.
Thanks. Have a good day.
All right, Scott, we have Brandon here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Calling from Columbus, Ohio. Also a garage question. Big garage questions today. In lieu of turning off the floor and drawing a slab, or I'd say drawing a polyline solid like an elevation, is there any way of a setting or maybe a future enhancement to actually replicate the fact that the garage slab is going to slope?
Slope garage floor? Yeah,
well, they're going to based on, code.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, there's not an automatic way for the garage floor to slope in the program. You can take an elevation view and draw a slope line or put a pitch indicator on your floor plan view. And if you want to see it actually in 3D, I think the easiest way would just be to use your polyline solid tool and an elevation and, 1/4-inch slope, whatever you're doing in there. That's
the only goofy part, that works exactly as I would think, like just turning off the floor, drawing the slab, making it whatever you want. The only reason it even comes into play is, if you've got steps up, you just don't know how many steps up you have. If it's 18 inches at the garage door, well, what is it at the house?
Yeah.
That's where the really question is, but I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Brandon.
And Scott, our last question is from Scotty. Go ahead and ask your question.
Scotty here again from Massachusetts. One quick question for you, Scott. I was working on a project where I was doing a finished basement and I was trying to lay out the existing conditions. This was a walkout basement, so the foundation was stepped. An issue that I was having was I was using the break line or the break command to break the foundation. So, in certain segments, so that way I can do different height pony walls. But I noticed when I would do that and then try to adjust the heights, Chief Architect wants to force and make it one wall again. And then it pretty much just messes up all my jogs. Because I was trying to get accurate, you know what I mean, with how long the jogs were and how much they dropped. Right. Is there any way you can show that? Because I don't know if I'm just doing something wrong.
Sure.
Clearly I am, obviously.
Sure. So if you have a break, and let's just come over here and assume that we got a break on this wall. And I use my break tool, number 3 on the keyboard, and you have a break in here. And you're doing some manipulation of this, and then all of a sudden it joins, right?
Mm-hmm.
In X14, which is what I'm using today, there is a setting where you can turn that off. Brian, where is that tool at? Do you know? Is that in the defaults?
For breaking? No.
To retain same wall type so that it won't merge those?
I'm not sure. That's what.
Oh, I was asking for Brian.
Oh.
If he was out there. Anyways.
Sorry about that, Scott. I was the new setting for the walls. Is that what you're asking?
So they won't auto merge.
That's in the general wall defaults. I think you're in X14 there. So right there, yeah. at the bottom of the list there.
Okay, so the setting down here is, if you turn this auto merge off, it won't merge those. Assuming that so that's an X14, it's out in beta if you want to get it, but let's assume that you're still using X13. You want to manipulate this wall, you don't want that break to go away. The easiest way to do that is to make a copy of your wall type. So let's assume that, maybe you have the as-built wall and the remodel wall. Just open up the wall type, and underneath the wall types, that's just using a simple concrete wall, I would make a copy of it. And for lack of a better thing, I'd call it, something different, concrete wall 2. And if we just change the color of this to be clearly something different, so then we know that it's adjusted. And then as you make adjustments in here, it's not going to auto merge. It will continue to be separate wall. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And then when you get the condition of a walkout basement, then you can, make the adjustments as you need to.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, I'm going to give that a whirl and see how that works.
Okay, great. All right, well, that wraps up today's session. If you stayed with us through all those questions, thanks a lot. So a few comments as we close out. We're going to be back here next week. And if I pop open the website and we go over to our events and training, next week we'll be back with the roofs and options for building the roof. Again, we've been trying to focus on the Austin sample plan that you can download from the website. Following that, we'll have ceilings the next week. That'll be on Thursday. And that's after our time change that apparently happened this weekend. On Wednesday and Friday of next week, we have a kitchens and baths training class, as well as a residential intermediate training class. Those are online. They're 4 hours across 4 days. We split that up in 2 weeks. So if you're interested in signing up for one of those classes, those begin next week. Of course, you can always take our classes on demand and use those at a self-pace. And then on Friday, this is a free session. It's called our Chief Boot Camp. That's available at 10 o'clock Friday morning. So if you're new to the program and want some tips on how to get started, this is a great way to participate. And we have an instructor that will manage your questions. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming today, and hopefully we'll see you back here same time, same place for roofs. And thanks a lot.